Great. So welcome everyone to the Financing Nature-Based Solutions webinar. So the event is one of the partner event of the EU Green Week and is organized by the CARDIMED, the FutureLake and the NURISH projects. So together today, we will explore some pathways to scalable biodiversity restoration and nature-based entrepreneurship. So today, I will be co-moderating this event with Alexandra Tatou from the National Technical University and myself, Najla Kamerji from CIMIDA. So I see that people are still joining. So maybe Alexandra will give us an overview of the agenda today.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. So today we have 5 very interesting presentations in this event. We start with 2 case studies. So first, we have insights for the cost effectiveness of NBS from the city of Malaga in Spain. And we continue with Scotland and the first landscape enterprise network in Leven. The third presentation is about ecosystem restoration and insurance risk management, switching to this very interesting sector of insurance in nature-based solutions and ecosystem restoration. And the last 2 presentations are more focused on funding opportunities. So we are going to hear about funding opportunities and the role of entrepreneurship, and about instruments for freshwater restoration and how these can be funded. So I think, Najla, you can switch. Yes.
Right, so we have a quite schedule that is a bit busy for today, but before starting with the first presentation, maybe a few questions just to get to know you a bit better and the whole participants in the room. So please grab your phone and scan the QR code or simply join Slido by adding this the code that figures on the slide. So my first question, you still have the QR code if you are still want to join. So which sector do you represent today? Are you a researcher, a public authority, an NGO, maybe representing the private sector and financial institutions, or other kind of organizations? So basically, we have a lot of NGOs and civil society representatives today, many researchers also. Oh, we have quite some public authorities, so this is nice to have you today. Many of the private sectors, but not so many financial institutions. But yeah, we see that there is a harmony between all of these organizations. Great. So moving to the next question.
Okay, so the next question is, how familiar are you with innovative finance mechanisms for MBS? Maybe the finance institutions did not join because they know everything, right? So let's see who's in the room. Okay, so it seems that most of us have like an average level of knowledge, let's say, or like lower than we would like. So I hope today is going to be an opportunity to learn for all of us.
And
I hear some noise, so yeah, nice.
The last question is, according to you, in one word or one phrase, what do you think investors need most today to increase confidence in nature-based projects? What comes first to your mind to increase investment and confidence in these projects? So I see evidence, trust, transparency, interesting. Revenue estimation, oh. Traceability, verified impacts, risk mitigation, evidence of returns. So yeah, I see that some people master a bit the language of investors and banks. Accountability, proof of concept, courage. That's a funny one. Great. So yeah, we can see that most of the responses are associated with the effectiveness of the solutions, but there is also a lot of work to do in order to estimate the return on scale of these solutions. Brilliant. So maybe a few tips before we start with our first presentation for today.
Yeah, so please keep your mics muted so that we can hear the speakers presenting. You can keep your cameras on, and please write questions or thoughts or reflections in the chat. We will be using your input to have the discussion at the end of the webinar. And in the meantime, speakers may be responding to your questions in written form in the chat. And please be aware that this webinar is being recorded and we will upload it on YouTube for future audience to watch. So we can start with the first presentation. The first speaker is Antonia Lorenzo from BioAzul. I will give a brief introduction of Antonia before she starts. So Antonia is a CEO and Research and Development Director of BioAzul. That is a Spanish innovation SME specialized in sustainable water management and circular economy. She has more than 20 years of experience in European and international innovation projects and supports the development, implementation, and financing of water projects for climate resilience, biodiversity restoration, and sustainable urban development. She is pursuing her PhD on economic evaluation of water use projects and has published research on cost-benefit analysis and environmental valuation. And apart from that, she's the president of the Malaga Nature-Based Solution Cluster and co-leader of the Water and Sustainable Agri-Food Systems Expert Group at Water Europe. So, Antonia, we're looking forward to your presentation.
Thank you, Alexandra. Hello, everyone. I will share my screen now to start my presentation. Please let me know when I have like 2-3 minutes left. Then I can speed up because I start talking but I can see my screen now. Okay, so today I will talk about a case study that was performed in the city of Malaga 3 years ago. Before, I would like to say some words about the CARDIMED project in which we are partner. Is also being represented today by me. So CARDIMED is climate adaptation and resilience demonstrated in the Mediterranean region. This is a climate adaptation mission Horizon Europe project lasting 54 months with more than 50 partners and around 19 million euros budget. So the project is focused on the Mediterranean as a climate hotspot, but muffering quite a lot of effects, negative one from the climate change. For example, the land and sea warming is going much faster, than the global average. The project vision is to enable this systemic transformation for regional climate resilience in the Med, in this hotspot, by unifying and mainstreaming nature-based solutions, as well other engineered infrastructure, and is based in 4 pillars: digital technologies, socioeconomic resilience, welfare nexus, and nature-based solution. The project foreseen 83 interventions, 47 different types of nature-based solutions, 9 demonstrators in 10 regions, and more than 10 replication sites. You will see later the video, or you will probably have access to the presentation. And here you can see the geographical distribution of the demo and also of some of the replication sites. Before I move to presenting the work and the case study, I would like also to talk about this CARDIMED Resilience Alliance that has been organized and is going to be launched by regions, municipalities, communities participating in CARDIMED. The idea is to enlarge this partnership and share site partner uptake and introduce new demos, new success cases, all in coordination with the mission of adaptation to climate change from the European Commission. So I invite you to go to this QR code and join this alliance. Okay, then we move to this cost-benefit analysis of nature-based solutions in urban infrastructure that was performed and is still there. It's implemented in a Hotel Mariposa, in the city of Malaga, south of Spain. Before I move to the work done and the results of the cost-benefit analysis, I would like to explain a little bit the difference in between financial assessment and economic assessment. So when we think about a financial assessment, we are about cash flows. And this is normally the assessment that project developers or investors are doing in order to check the profitability or the financial sustainability of an intervention of a project. While we are talking about economic assessment, this is much broader and is focused also on societal benefits, including what we call externalities. And this is a very useful tool, for example, for public administration in order to decide where the public money should go. So, for example, in the tenders processes. So the framework follow different steps. So the first one is the definition of the alternatives. We are thinking about nature-based solutions, but we need to know which are the other options. For example, grace or more traditional infrastructure or an hybrid approach. Then we have to estimate the cost of the different alternatives, also to have this information which is needed for the cost-benefit analysis, identify direct benefit, and also these externalities, also called co-benefits, and then apply the metrics that are the one for a specific case. We can choose a net present value, we can choose benefit cost ratio, we can choose payback period. It will depend on the kind of project. Then we have also performed this sensitive analysis to see how the outcomes of the result of the cost-benefit analysis will change if we change some of the parameters that we have assumed at the beginning of the study. Consider some aspects that are linked to some risks, for example, changes in the legal framework, vulnerability related to the climate, social acceptance, etc. And then by the end, some final recommendations that are in many cases aligned to global strategies, alignments such as United Nations, Sustainable Development Goals, Global Diversity Framework. Okay, so the project was run in 2022. That was a cascade funding under the Meta Building Horizon Europe project, which aim was to support the construction sector to make the transition to be more sustainable. So we propose a pilot, a demonstration of a hybrid solution, in this case, blue-green, combining a vertical garden with a gray water treatment technology. So the idea was to go more circular. And the project was run by BioAzul, and we were taking care of the blue part, and then another SME from Sweden, Bioautonomy, that was taking care of the green part. Some context. So the trend is that the cities should go more green, and these nature-based solutions, such as these vertical gardens, could be one of the solutions to reduce this environmental footprint. And the project Meta Building was focusing on that, go more sustainable. but also create these healthier cities with the green. But what is happening in some Mediterranean contexts that the water is not available. So when you want to start these green projects, sometimes you don't have the water available to irrigate them. In addition, construction buildings are normally designed in a business as usual linear approach, which is using the water and generating wastewater. So our approach was to apply circular strategies in order to treat this water on site and use it for irrigating this vertical garden. That was the hotel, which is in the Soho district of Malaga. It's a very hard one with very few green in the whole district. And the idea was to have this vertical garden in one of the facades. This is how it was organized. So we were segregating basin water and shower water from 2 bathrooms, from 2 of the rooms of the hotel. And then they were going to the parking, in which we installed the grey water recycling station. The water was treated, reclaimed, and then it was pumped to an irrigation tank on the top of the hotel. And from there, the hydroponic vertical garden was irrigated. So that was the intervention. The grey water treatment station, traditional treatment, let's say, was formed by a prefiltration, membrane bioreactor, and a disinfection with sodium hypochlorite, with a treatment capacity of 400 liters per day. That was the one, so the volume needed for the hydroponic vertical system. So the removal efficiency, you have it here, it's quite high from the technology we propose. And then we have this hydroponic vertical garden, which was 100 square meters, 2,500 plants and 18 species. And the autonomy was making some kind of estimation about the benefits of having this 100 square meter of green infrastructure. So the production of oxygen, the absorption of different compounds like CO2, dust, harmful gases, and heavy metals. The isolation capacity that was, let's say, leading to a reduction of the temperature inside and outside near the garden. And also this isolation was translated into a reduction of the street noise inside the hotel, and it was like 40% less compared to traditional facade with traditional materials. For sure, it was increasing also the human biodiversity, birds and pollinators, and the whole thing was done with no extra water. So it was the water being consumed in the 2 bathrooms, the one that was is being used because the garden is still there, to irrigate the vertical garden. So this is like 130,000 liters of drinking water, tap water every year. So the cost-benefit analysis we performed, it was focusing first on the CAPEX, so the investment cost, and then the OPEX, the operation and maintenance, and that these were the calculations. So it was an investment of 76,000, and the operation and maintenance, it was around 12,500. This is on the one side, more financial assessment. Then we were checking the direct benefit of the garden, the vertical garden, and some externalities as well. Which are the parameters we were taking into account? Okay, so we were asking the owners of the hotel, and also in Booking, the website, and also in the streets through a survey about the willingness of paying a little bit more for the night room, for the room for a night. And then we were using 2.5 euros extra for each room of the hotel, taking into account 70% occupation during the year. And also because of this isolation effect of the vertical garden, we were estimating a decrease in the energy consumption of 30%. Based on the energy prices and this extra, say, rate, so 2.5 euros, then we were calculating these amounts that you can see here. On top of that, we were going also to the externalities of monetizing the CO2 that was not emitted link it to the electricity that was not consumed. For this, in order to monetize this, we use the European Commission Vademecum, which is giving you the euros per ton of CO2 equivalent every year. In this case, we were using the one for 2022. That was the year the garden was installed. And our metrics here is the payback period. So we said, okay, we have an additional investment, we have reached operation and maintaining costs, but we also have some incomes for the extra 2.5 euros, and then we have also the savings in electricity and also the money, the CO2 that is not emitted anymore. So we then found out that the payback period for the project was less than 3 years. And then we started doing this sensitive analysis, and we said, okay, maybe the savings of the electricity are a little less than 30, could be 20, but then we are going also to update the saddle price of CO2 in 2025. And then we have similar payback period, around 3 years. We can play a little bit more around this sensitive analysis, saying, okay, but if we increase a little bit more the room rate, because, I mean, there is a willingness to pay in between 5 and 10 euros more, according to what we did. And if we use this data, we can see that the payback period is even lower than 2 years. So we have this also this calculation for the 3 scenarios, saying, okay, which is the water consumed, which is the electricity consumed if we stay without doing nothing in the hotel, or we install a conventional vertical garden, but without this circular approach on the use of reclaimed grey water. And we have our vertical ecosystem as a scenario 3. As you can see here from the calculation, say the most competitive and cheapest one is the vertical ecosystem. Some information about the public acceptance issue, which is very relevant and is really a driver for this nature-based solution or every project. So we were making 70 interviews outside the hotel, citizens of Malaga, but also visitors. And as you can see here for the results, the garden was very well received. And they were sure that the garden was providing benefits, especially in water saving, in air quality, and thermal comfort. 90% of those that were asked thought that these solutions would be replicated in Malaga, and that was also the aim of this project, to be the catalyzer of other initiatives similar to this and create these green areas in the city. This is little by little happening somehow. And 60% they were also willing to pay a little bit more for a hotel that is, let's say, committed to these kind of interventions. And almost everyone was quite sure and agreed that the public administration should provide more support to this kind of initiatives. And the alignment with global strategies, the World Bank environmental policies, United Nations development goals, and the global biodiversity framework are clear for these kind of interventions. To conclude, I want to, let's say, point out that this is, it was, and it still is, the only vertical garden in the province of Malaga which is being irrigated with 100% of reclaimed water from these 2 toilets. That the benefits associated to this kind of intervention for the building itself, but also for the neighborhoods, are clear, and they can be environmental, economic, and social benefits. That this can be an economically viable solution. So that was a hotel, so we could play around with the price of the rooms, and that was helping quite a lot. As you can see here, the increase is the main source of revenue that is compensating, especially with the capex and the OPEX. But in general, it should be an economically viable solution if we take into account other externalities for other public administration buildings, for example. And that they say that I don't know if I have consumed all the time, but I would like you for your attention.
Thank you, Antonia. No, you've managed your time perfectly. Thanks a lot.
For questions, you can also write to me or write them in the chat.
I think that we have a couple of questions in the chat, but we will go back to them at the end of the webinar.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Antonia. Yeah. Now I would like to welcome our next speakers, Amelia Heath from Forth River Trust and Tom Brown from the Lens Company. So Amelia is leading the Trust on Nature Finance, including the pilot on Nature Finance project and the Live Landscape Enterprise Network, which is the first in Scotland. She has an experience in developing and leading climate resilience projects in Scotland and has been participating in national and international climate resilience networks. So Tom will also join Amelia during this presentation. He's the manager of the LANS program, and he has background delivering climate adaptation and mitigation project with a focus on the agricultural sector. And he has worked with organizations such as the Worldwide Fund for Nature, DEFRA, and TESCO. So Amelia and Tom, I hand it over to you.
Thanks very much, and thanks to everyone for your time today. I'm going to introduce myself, Amelia Heath, Director at Forth Rivers Trust, and then hand over to my colleague Tom, who's going to take you through the first part of our presentation.
Hi everyone, thanks for having us today. I'm Tom, so I'm the Programme Manager for LENS in Scotland. I'm working very closely with Amelia and Forth Rivers Trust. So I'll start with a brief intro to LENS, or Landscape Enterprise Networks, essentially what problem we're trying to solve, how the model works, and what are some of the unique features. I'll then give an overview of LENS in Scotland before handing over to Amelia for a more in-depth look at what we're doing in the Leven, and then where we hope we can take this work in the coming years. So just to set the scene then, in terms of the problem that we're trying to solve at LENS, in Scotland, as elsewhere, climate impacts on farmers are increasing and only getting worse. Last year, we had our driest spring in 60 years, followed by our hottest summer on record. And it's currently 26 degrees in Glasgow, which may not sound a lot if you're in Malaga, but it's a lot if you're in Glasgow. And this is obviously having massive effects on farmers that rely on the landscape in terms of crop yield, crop quality, ability to abstract water, etc. As well as the farmers that rely on the landscape, this is also having significant impact on businesses. So here are 3 LENS funders, but I'll just zoom in on Diageo as they're an important funder in Scotland. The water scarcity I mentioned previously last year meant that they had to halt abstraction and production at several whisky distilleries, and also there was impacts on the malting barley supply chain. So they're coming at LENS and involved in the project from a real resilience angle within their supply chain. But obviously, this is also against the backdrop of net zero targets, climate risk disclosures, etc., which also motivate different organizations to become involved. So we see regenerative agriculture as part of a solution to building resilience and dealing with some of these risks. And the evidence base is growing here. Here's a study from EARA that in the face of climate events, regenerative farms are showing higher productivity, higher margins, lower input costs, importantly, which given geopolitics at the moment is particularly of importance, and also in the longer term, equivalent yields once we've overcome the kind of short-term loss from transitioning to regenerative practices. However, in order to transition to regenerative practices, there are economic barriers, but also operational and social barriers. So upfront cost covering that initial yield decline, and then also kind of limited implementation know-how, lack of trust, these sorts of things. And at LENS, we're trying to overcome both the economic and operational and social barriers. So we provide funding to farmers for different practices, such as cover cropping, minimum tillage, hedgerow creation. But we also provide training and build a community of farmers that are looking to shift practice. And all of this really is in an effort to close the gap between the money that's needed within our landscapes and the money that's currently available. So we're sitting at 5% by some estimates of the money needed to transition our agricultural systems to adapt to the worst effects of climate change. And that's where the lens model comes in. So we bring organizations together who have a shared reliance on a landscape to co-fund regenerative agriculture and nature-based solutions to drive regional landscape resilience. So we're a proven model. We've delivered around 50,000 tons of emissions reductions and removals since 2024. This isn't a credit. This is within supply chain mitigation for food and drink companies, actually reducing emissions on their farms. We've delivered around 26 million in farmer funding since 2021. And importantly, we look beyond carbon. So we look at things like pesticide usage, increases in biodiversity, etc. So trying to capture that holistic impact of changing practices. As a model, it's been successful across Europe. You can see the countries we're involved in there, but Poland, Hungary, Italy, East of England, Yorkshire, and the Leven in Scotland. Importantly, although we work across a wide variety of regions, we work with place-based organisations such as Forth Rivers Trust to ensure that we're dealing with local environmental issues, and every lens is place-based. In terms, very briefly, how the model works is we're demand-led, which means we secure funding from organisations that rely on a landscape prior to going out and recruiting farmers and implementing measures on farm. So as Lens, we secure that funding from food and drink companies, from water companies, from local councils, etc. We then recruit farmers who are able to deliver on the needs of those organisations, whether that be carbon reduction, biodiversity, water quality improvements, a huge range of interests really. We then recruit farmers who are eligible and help them design measures that can deliver on those goals, and then we provide the reporting and monitoring there once the measures have been implemented to enable robust claims by the funding organisations. Our reporting protocol is one of the unique things about Lens. So as I say, as well as climate mitigation, we also report across soil health, biodiversity, water, and now farmer wellbeing in 2026. So you can see the actual individual in-depth metrics that every Lens funder receives on the right there. I won't go through all of them, but importantly, they're aligned with kind of all the key industry standards you'd expect. So greenhouse gas protocol, science-based targets, SAI platforms, Regenerating Together program. And then we also work with a network of third-party delivery partners, such as AgriCarbon, EcoAct. AgriCarbon go out on farm, they sample every field in Lens, making sure we're making robust soil organic carbon claims. EcoAct, third-party, verify our maths, making sure that any claims are very credible. The fact that we report across such a wide variety of metrics enables us to bring in a wide variety of stakeholders. So we work with a lot of food and beverage companies, but also water and utility companies who are interested in those water metrics and soil health metrics, local government coming at it from a farmer well-being angle or a biodiversity angle, and increasingly looking at the role of finance and how finance can help. And as I say, we work with a lot of place-based partners there as well. Having such a network of partners enables us to co-fund a lot of the practices on farm. So I'll use an example to illustrate this concept, but in the Tweed Lens, we have a water company who are interested in reducing diffuse pollution. And we have Diageo, who are interested in reducing carbon emissions and improving the resilience of their farm. They are coming together and splitting the cost of practices such as cover cropping and minimum tillage 50-50 in order to both achieve their goals at a cheaper cost, whilst also making sure that farmers are being paid fairly. So that wide variety of stakeholders opens up these opportunities for co-funding. And we try and put farmers at the centre of the scheme. So as opposed to some credit schemes, most lens contracts are 1-year measures, 1-year contracts. You're not tying up land for life. We provide farm level reports, including all those metrics I showed you earlier, so farmers can see what practices are working and iterate. And we also provide training in community, so farmers have access to an agronomist, a regenerative farm advisor, and we gather their feedback and have farmer forums so they can feed into how the process is working. And you can see here some kind words from a lens farmer who was able to get a preferential bank account loan rate due to being involved in lens and the data that gave her. So lens in Scotland, I'll quickly go over this before passing over to the Leven. But we've been running 2 years now, giving funding to farmers. It's been a few more years than that, scoping the project and getting things running. We have 6 funders coming together, implementing measures on farm. So a mix of utility companies, food and drink companies, local government and water companies. We have a network of local partners, so Forth Rivers Trust, Tweed Forum and Spey Catchment Initiative. And we're also supported and aligned with Nature Scots goals, Scottish Government's goals for achieving net zero. In terms of numbers then, 2025 was our first year distributing money to farmers. We had around 628 hectares of measures, cover crops, minimum tillage, hedgerows, etc. Amelia will come on to that in more depth. And we distributed 110,000 to farmers across 10 farms with 3 funders. And this year we're up to around 2,100 hectares of measures, 600,000 in spend, 35 farms and 6 funders. So we're really achieving some scale in Scotland now, and hopefully we can continue this momentum. But that's all from me. I'll pass over to Amelia to do a deep dive on the Leven, which is our first flagship programme in Scotland.
Thanks, Tom. Yep, so I'm going to give you a bit more of a deep dive on a lens on the ground in practice into Leven Lens, which is the first landscape enterprise network in Scotland. So I'm going to talk about how this came about, the context of Leven Lens, what was the process of development, and then some of the learnings that we've taken from being involved. But first, just to start with the context of Leven Lens, I should first explain the place-based context of the Leven River catchment itself. So the Leven River catchment is a 422 square kilometre catchment flowing into the Firth of Forth in the east central belt of Scotland. It spans the Perth and Kinross and Fife local authority regions of Scotland. Especially relevant here is the Upper Leven catchment, where the rivers and tributaries, as you can see in the right map there on the slide, flow into Loch Leven. Now, decades-long challenges with algal blooms have been present in this Upper Leven catchment flowing into Loch Leven, and nutrient imbalances as well that have impacted Loch Leven itself and algal blooms in the loch. Loch Leven itself is one of the FutureLakes lakes that's being looked at in that project, and it's also a case study of global importance. So it's internationally significant. It's got multiple designations within Scotland. It's a national nature reserve and a local bird reserve with the RSPB as well. It's also a very well-studied loch. There's a database of fortnightly monitoring that dates back to 1968, and the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology has been monitoring Loch Leven for a very long time. They also run a source apportionment study that's repeated at 10-year intervals. It is just being repeated, it's at the beginning of being repeated this year, but the last source apportionment study data pointed towards water quality challenges attributed or contributed to by agricultural diffuse pollution. So there already exists a Loch Leven catchment management group, and this holds representation from public bodies and NGOs working in the area. So they consider some of those issues that arise from those source apportionment studies and some of that data that points to the different sources that contribute to those different diffuse pollutions impacting the nutrient balance of the loch. Forth Rivers Trust is on this catchment management group. Forth Rivers Trust, the organisation I work for, are a charitable environmental NGO with a remit to protect, conserve and enhance the rivers, tributaries and freshwater bodies of the Forth catchment, which I already said is in the central belt of Scotland. So we're a place-based organisation and we hold local relationships We're always looking for ways to scale up nature-based solution delivery, but also to deliver solutions that work for people and businesses while also having positive regenerative impacts on our freshwater environments. So that's always a challenge. We take an integrated catchment management approach, and for this reason, we felt that LINS was a mechanism that might be suitable to help build multi-sector collaboration that benefits ecosystems and people while also helping to deliver NBS at scale. So this put Forth Rivers Trust in the role of what we call a regional operator. So that's the place-based organization that facilitates the coordination of multi-sector collaboration and aspects of LINS development. So we bring together the local knowledge and context and the local networks and relationships that are key to making the mechanisms like LINS work on the ground. But I should also say that LINS is an iterative process. So once you're through the initial scoping and setup, it runs on an annual cycle where you deliver a trade, then review that process, learn from it, adapt it, and then the trade process begins again the next year. So the initial Leave-in LINS process started in 2022 when NatureScot and Scottish Enterprise asked Forth Rivers Trust to do a scoping study to determine whether LINS would be viable in the Leave-in region, particularly looking to help the situation around Loch Leave-in. The scoping study focused on landscape analysis, so namely mapping the land use challenges and dependencies that existed in the region. We identified 6 priority types of off-takers or beneficiaries of the landscape, and we focused on food and drink supply chains in the region. But then, importantly, we needed to speak to the businesses to find out their interests and if our understanding of their landscape dependencies also matched their own. We also did a number of interviews with farmers, so not just to find out if they'd be receptive to an approach like LINS or if they would use the mechanism, but how it would work with their farm business models and what opportunities it might offer them. Also, to what extent they were currently taking up public funding or weren't, and if they weren't, what were the barriers and challenges preventing them from doing so. So then we overlaid all of this with an assessment of nature-based solutions opportunities in the catchment. And we determined that there was sufficient scope to pursue trying to establish a LINS in the Leave-in catchment. There was sufficient interest from the farmers and the funders. So we then secured further funding in 2023 from the public body NatureScot. It was a 1-year grant-funded project to try and get the LINS off the ground. We used what we learned in the initial scoping phase to do stakeholder mapping and engagement in this phase. So we pulled together all the threads of the local relationships and networks to establish the LINS trade. Between September 2023 and March 2025, we undertook a theory of change process where we collected 63 individual and group insights. We had meetings with over 15 community initiatives. We did surveys and workshops and farm visits, and we had meetings with over 50 businesses and public bodies in the region. We also dug into the technicalities of LINS. So LINS as a model is already operating across several landscapes and already has a large database of measures that can be applied in different landscape scenarios for a range of multiple outcomes. But implementing a LINS in Scotland required consulting a range of local stakeholders on current agronomic practices in Scotland and finding out what works, what could work better, and then refining the LINS measures based on both funder requirements, but also what had the highest potential to deliver across a range of outcomes for biodiversity, water, soil, health, and carbon. All of that work combined led to the open and trade of Leave-in LINS in 2025. So as Tom mentioned before, working towards integrated catchment management and upscaling regenerative agriculture, doing so in a holistic approach. We opened our first trade with 10 participating farms, delivering measures across 628 hectares and delivering £110,000 directly to farmers to implement measures. Importantly, in the Scottish context, LINS offered new income to farmers and land managers to de-risk the transition to sustainable practices that improve resilience, both for their farm businesses and the environment. And to dig into those numbers a little bit more, we know that about 64% of the funding there went towards measures that improved soil health, and that includes the very important category of reducing nutrient inputs relevant to the freshwater context of this catchment. 16% of the funding went to improving ground cover, And about 18% went towards increasing biodiversity, so measures that were directly related to increasing biodiversity. And importantly, 2% also went towards more long-term practice change. So 2% of the funding of the first trade went to farmers to be demonstration farms, where they could actually share their knowledge, participate in learning networks, and showcase some of the good work that was being done on the ground. In November 2025, we reviewed this whole process, took feedback from farmers and feedback from funders, and then started the whole thing again in trade year 2. But one key thing that we have been learning about is how the feedback loops of Leave and Lens are a process that feed into the wider communication and stakeholder engagement of the catchment. So the Lens process has created a forum for engaging different groups of stakeholders and considering where interests overlap and combine to create their greater momentum and drive towards needs-based delivery. The diagram here shows how stakeholder input is actively flowing in feedback loops into the decision-making processes of each future Lens trade. And of course, that allows for the assessment of delivery of Lens within a more systemic context. So for one example, one thing we've learned from our work to develop Lens is that there's far greater need for farmer-to-farmer collaboration, clustering, and knowledge-sharing networks. However, the resource and financial backing to support farmer-to-farmer peer networks in Scotland is not yet in place. So to further support that farmer peer-to-peer networking, Forth Rivers Trust went out and secured a bit more funding to set up a farmer peer-to-peer network called the Leave and Catchment Collective. So this sits alongside Leave and Lens, and it feeds into Leave and Lens, as well as developing resilience and capacity amongst the farm networks in the catchment. And this way, Lens is also creating an important opportunity to feed back to policymakers on learning about blockers and what's needed for more effective scaling of nature-based solutions delivery. This is manifested in our experience in sharing learnings both at the Scottish level, but also at the international level, where groups have been interested to learn if Lens would be a mechanism appropriate for their place-based landscape context as well. So you can see in the pictures here, these are some of the events that we've hosted, not only for local Scottish policymakers, but also for international audiences wanting to learn about Lens and the mechanism and how it might work in their place-based contexts as well. And just to conclude on the potential of where we are now versus where we want to eventually be, to bring it back to this slide that Tom had earlier. So this is the trade figures for 2026 and what's being delivered in Scotland through the two combined Lens regions, measures of 2,150 hectares, up to £600,000 going directly to farmers, with approximately 35 farms participating. And we hope to add 2 new regions to that over the coming years. So Lens is currently actively being scoped in 2 new regions, with the launch of a new region hoping to happen in the next, again, trade year for 2027. And this is an example of where we would like to get to. So the longest operating Lens in the east of England, this is an example of where it was at 4 years of operation. It had 112 farms involved and was delivering about £3.15 million to farmers and delivering across over 14,000 hectares. So that's what we're aspiring to in scaling Lens through Scotland and all the different regions.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Mariana. Okay, so let's now move to the sector of insurance and nature with our next speaker, Dr. Jaroslav Misiak, a principal scientist at CMCC and the former founding director of the Risk Assessment and Adaptation Strategies Division. His work focuses on understanding climate risks and helping governments, businesses, and communities develop effective adaptation and resilience strategies. And his research spans climate risk assessment, disaster risk reduction, adaptation finance, climate business innovation, and nature positive solutions. Jaroslav Misiak is also actively involved in several European initiatives supporting the EU mission on adaptation to climate change and works on developing innovative financial instruments, insurance solutions, and investment approaches that can accelerate adaptation. He's also engaged in advancing climate services and promoting more consistent and harmonized approaches to climate risk and adaptation across Europe. So, Yarrow, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Ella. And thank you also for the excellent stage prepared by the previous speakers. So I will take it to another topic that is, you know, the insurance and risk transfer and how they might be used in order to promote nature restoration and protection of ecosystem services. And this is the result of the European Horizon project, coordination and supporting action, which is called NATURANCE, Nature for Insurance, Insurance for Nature. And we have been working over the past 3.5 years on gathering the information and bringing together the people and knowledge networks in order to exchange on what can be done and what are the shared principles and how to design intervention that are advancing risk reduction as well as financial protection against disasters. We have also reserved some of our time and resources to innovation, although we were a supporting action. And this innovation was conveyed using the innovation laboratories. We had 9 innovation laboratories organized in 3 cohorts and involving a lot of people. So the overall goal was to look into how those solutions might work and what are the implementation opportunities. So you can imagine the way how to combine insurance or risk protection in these ways. On the left side, you have the situation where there is no insurance cover. And this is increasingly being a problem because of the extreme events being amplified by climate change, and eventually unprotected territory is also prone to systemic risk, right? If you have a larger event that is affecting number of properties or the prospect of similar events being increasing might be internalized in the value of the property that eventually might lead to a financial shock in the country. In the middle, you have a classical situation where there is an insurance available and accessible, but the increasing cost of providing insurance cover and more difficulties in properly assessing the risk might lead the insurers to withdrawing from the area or increasing the prices that might make the insurance either not accessible or not available. So the third way is on the right side is that we include a certain ways of nature restoration in order to in the contractual terms of the insurance, or in other ways we can also think of the ways of insuring nature itself. Right, typically that works at the property level, but the efficiency is much higher if you are working on the neighborhood level or even landscape level. So what those solutions basically rely on. So the first is, and we have provided the evidence, collected the evidence, assessed the opportunities. Nature restoration is a cost-effective strategy to reduce climate-related risk in a number of occasions. The second principle is that insurance does have the potential to play a key role in preserving, restoring ecosystems, and by doing so, extending the viability of insurance in many places. That means it's not just replacing the public value that is being lost, but also contributing to our own business continuity, and avoided risk and damage by reinforcing the ecosystem services is measurable, is quantifiable, and might be wrapped up in what we call a greenium. Greenium has many meanings, but basically in the insurance schemes, we refer to the reduction of the premiums, the price that you are paying for your insurance contract, that is linked to the different opportunities or different intervention that you undertook in order to reduce the risk you are exposed to. So similar things you have also in car insurance. Most of you have a car insurance. If you commit to a certain way of driving or managing your car, you might reduce your premium. Exactly the same can be implemented in different ways. That includes your property insurance or other type of business interruption or, number of other insurance products. So this is premiums. Now the way how it works, you might either include incentives for nature restoration or certain type of management of your property or land in your traditional insurance contract. That might be, you might either include restoration clause in the payouts, you might include the deductible incentives for restored ecosystem services, or in some cases you might make the renewal of the insurance conditional to certain intervention on your property or your land. The more ambitious type of insurance contract might be insuring the ecosystem and ecosystem services themselves. We already have certain products like Mesoamerican coral reef. It's very well known. Basically, what is being insured is the ecosystem itself. The ecosystem is protecting the coastal properties, and when the ecosystem is harmed by a tropical cyclone, for example, the payout from insurance is ensuring the rapid restoration of the coral reef. And that means extending the protection services to the coastal properties. So there are a number of ways how it might work, and we have been looking into. But we have been also looking into what makes us believe that this type of intervention might be feasible and might be taken up by the insurers and in the society as at large. And we have been mapping this side of societal trends. The first of it is that the financial protection is not anymore a private service, right? Financial protections against extreme events is a sort of a part of resilience or resilience goals, and that means a public value. And this is why the public sectors are increasingly looking into incentivizing the risk reduction, but also providing insurance cover in those areas where the individual financial or commercially provided financial offer is not available. Sorry for that. I skipped right. And the second trend that we came across is that the type of financial losses induced or indirect by extreme climate event are reaching the systemic level. That means this is exactly why the public decision makers need to be very aware about the potential of extreme event creating a cascade of related financial losses that eventually manifest themselves and propagate across the different sectors that might, for example, you might have a country that is heavily in debt, as a public debt is very high, and in the case there is no insurance cover available or not anymore. And if there is a large extreme event that is creating the need for public to intervene and compensate part of the losses, either on the public infrastructure or even on the private property, that means that might also lead either to the financial bubbles via the property prices, or it might also be impacting the credit worthiness of the country itself. And that makes it difficult to repay the public debt at the next cycle. So those are only a few examples of how these might reach the systemic level and why the public sector really needs to look into that. The other reasons are we really need to invest into nature protection and restoration of ecosystem services because they provide the basic condition for the life, and they are providing also cost-effective solution for the climate adaptation and disaster risk reduction. So in NATURANCE, we have been looking into a number of those situations where in specific context, what can be done by whom, who is paying, who is benefiting, how to distribute the burden of the cost, and how to distribute the benefits. So that was really nice. We brought together hundreds of knowledge networks, organization working on this from different thematic areas like financial organization, insurers, investors, regional and local authorities, organizing networks, risk analysts, risk brokers, and advocates of nature-based solution and ecosystem restoration. And for each innovation laboratory, we have been looking at the condition, what to do, how to do that. So as for example, an example that we have explored a similar way as in the previous intervention, we have looked into how to gradually transform the intensive agriculture dominated land use into a incentive that provides the farmers the opportunities to restore the nature or create improve the nature connectivity, biodiversity connectivity, and improve the overall ecosystem services from the land in order to reduce the disaster risk. This is done basically in specific condition. In Italy, we have the land boards that are taking care of the management of the land, and they are providing the drainage service and irrigation service. Irrigation service is provided for the farmers, and land drainage is basically provided for the property holder owners in the area, because we are living in the main poor plain is basically reclaimed marshland. So without them, the land would turn into a wetland again. So we have been looking together with them into a scheme that is based on controlled flooding as the last resort of the risk management, and gradual transformation of certain part of the agricultural land into restored ecosystem within surrounded by the agricultural land. And we looked into how the insurance can compensate the risk of compensating the damage caused by controlled flooding, and eventually the operation, the risk that are associated with the operation of these boats, and eventually how this might be transformed into creating a green island that have a multifunctional purpose. But in principle, we have been looking also together with the land boards into adding a new mandate to them, because currently they have two mandates. They are semi-public organization, almost a authority able to charge or distribute a cost across those that benefits from these. And by adding additional mandate as the environmental steward, as the organization that is taking care of and investing in ecosystem restoration in their territories, they might deliver the value both to the residents and the businesses by reducing the risk and distributing the benefits. We haven't stopped there. We have been looking into how to translate, how to distill the shared principles and sort of the recommended practices when somebody is looking into similar schemes, how to turn it into practice. So we have been working together with the European and national standardization bodies, the SEN, European Standardization Organization, and they have a bottom-up community-led standardization process, which is called SEN Workshop Agreement. It basically brings together the community that would like to discuss and agree on the shared practices, and being facilitated by one of the national standardization offices, it's able to lead the community in formulating what needs to be done and what are the common principles. So we have been able to lead this process and ended up adopting eventually the SEN Workshop Agreement as the community pre-standard that is available to the international organization to be picked up and turned into international standard. So we looked into design principle, how to organize, similar how to introduce similar intervention and also shared metrics. And the shared metrics described how to make sure that this intervention is reliable. The investor that is interested to invest into a similar scheme is assured of the value that is created and the benefits or the payback scheme for him and for the others. So we have coupled the shared principles with the metrics in order to make the shared principles operational. I'm not going to talk about all of those. So we have 5 categories. They are complementing the existing norms and standards, including the domain-specific standards like the principle of sustainable insurance. And they are also providing a guidance what to look at and how to ensure that similar schemes are trusted, transparent, and eventually beneficial and deliver on the objective that was set up. So this is a quick overview about the matrices. We have metrics related to the economic soundness, the financial viability, environmental integrity, social impacts, and governance aspect. You might easily access the SEN workshop agreement from the SEN website, and even in this form as the community pre-standard, it might be referred to and be used in designing transparent investment solutions. So with that, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thanks, Yaro, for this insightful presentation. I think that, yeah, the clock is ticking, so maybe we can move to our next presentation. So I would like to welcome our next speakers, Georgia Frakolaki. So she's a chemical engineer from the National Technical University of Athens and a senior consultant at Break-Even. She has a PhD and an extensive expertise also in securing funding for innovation projects, as well as participating in EU-funded projects focused on sustainability assessment. So, Georgia, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Okay. So, hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. In the next few minutes, I will try to provide you an overview of the funding opportunities that are available to support climate adaptation and nature-based solutions. And I will also provide you the role of entrepreneurship in transforming these innovative solutions into marketable solutions. Before I jump to the available funding instruments, I will try to make you a short introduction of the NURISH project. NURISH is a Horizon Europe project that is dedicated on strengthening the climate resilience of rural communities through nature-based solutions. And and it brings together partners from 9 different countries. Through a network of 4 resilience hubs and 5 resilience nodes, it tries to support the transitions towards more regenerative and climate resilient rural communities. So its overall vision is to support these communities into becoming more climate resilient, and it has a framework that is set on 4 pillars. Pillar 1 is focused on capacity building and empowering local actors into addressing challenges, climate change challenges. The second pillar is focused on collaboration and co-creation among local authorities, businesses, citizens, and researchers. The third pillar is focused on nature-based innovation and the development of a nature-based economy. And the fourth pillar is focused on how digital tools can support climate adaptation, knowledge transfer, climate and decision-making. So today's presentation is more linked to the third pillar. The nature-based solutions are considered a key implementation mechanisms for several major EU policies, including European Green Deal, biodiversity strategy, the climate adaptation strategy, nature restoration regulation, and common agricultural policy. As a result, these are strongly supported through dedicated funding programs. Before, however, looking into the funding programs, it's important to understand why entrepreneurship matters in terms of a nature-based solution. So public funding and research projects are essential for the development of the nature-based solution and innovative solutions. However, these are often temporary and project-based. The real challenge, though, is to ensure that nature-based solutions, as the successful one, continue to create value beyond the end of the project. So here is where entrepreneurship comes to transform the pilot initiatives into marketable solutions. So also entrepreneurship comes to help them reach new markets, attract additional investment, and actually generate sustainable environmental and economic benefits over time. And a successful project is not always a successful business. So entrepreneurship has a critical role on helping this innovative solution to find their way to the market. And if we want nature-based solutions to move beyond the pilot stage and become sustainable businesses, access to funding on its own is not enough. So we need a supportive ecosystem to help enterprises grow and reach the market. Okay, first of all, of course, we need access to funding, ranging from public grants to venture capital and blended finance mechanisms, but also we need incubation and support structures such as business accelerators, mentoring programs, and innovation networks that will help these businesses strengthen their operational capacity. And finally, the public-private partnerships can play an important role by bringing together businesses, local authorities, and governments to share resources and increase their opportunities for scale-up. In general, funding can come from internal resources and external resources. External funding can be categorized into public, debt financing, and equity funding. The public includes the European funding and also national and regional or local resources. The debt financing refers to repayable sources of finance, such as bank loans and leasing forms. And equity financing refers to investors that come to provide their capital in exchange of ownership or shares of the company, for example, through venture capital firms or business angels. So to begin with the public funding and the EU funding, here are some of the main European funding programs that can support nature-based solutions. While these programs may differ in terms of scope, in terms of budget, in terms of rate, all of them can support organizations that work on environmental protection. And one common characteristic of all of this is that they all need participation based on international consortia rather than individual applications. Horizon Europe, for example, is the flagship, also all of you know, that is the flagship program for research and innovation and covers a great variety of themes, including also scopes that are of interest. For example, nature-based ecosystem restoration solutions and other parts. Biodiversa Plus is more focused on biodiversity and restoration actions, and it is launched on transnational calls. Live program is usually more focused on implementation and pilot and replication activities, and Interreg Europe usually always support cross-border and interregional cooperation, enabling regions or local actors, local authorities to address common challenges together. So the choice of the program depends on the maturity of the idea and the organization that is involved. As a general rule, Horizon Europe and Biodiversa Plus are more research-oriented, and the LIFE and Interreg are more focused on implementation and replication. Now, regarding national and regional funding, in addition to the direct European programs, an organization can access funding through these schemes. The national and regional funds are supported by European Commission and are funded by them and are implemented through partnership agreements between the European Commission and the member state. These funds are actually used by its country, and each country defines its own priorities and its own operational programs. For example, in Greece, we have ESPA. National and regional authorities are always responsible for launching the calls, for evaluating the proposal, and distributing the funds towards businesses, startups, and local authorities. So the main EU funding instruments behind all of this are usually European Regional Development Fund, Cohesion Fund, Just Transition Fund, and European Social Fund Plus. And unlike Horizon Europe or LIFE, participation here does not usually require joining an international consortium, making this seems more accessible for local or regional actors. Now, while the public funding is often the starting point for many such solutions, it's not the only source of finance that is available. For example, debt financing refers to repayable forms of financing that can support the growth of enterprises. The most common examples are business loans that are provided by commercial or development banks, and they are often used for investments, for expansion, equipment purchases, and the implementation of some projects. Businesses may also use leasing arrangements to acquire equipment or vehicles or technology without needing any large upfront investments. And in addition to this, we have green loans and sustainability-linked loans that are offering more favorable financing conditions that actually reward positive environmental performance. Equity financing is often used by innovative companies that have a strong growth potential and are looking to scale up the solutions and enter new markets. When evaluating investment opportunities, the investors typically look at 4 main criteria: the quality of the business idea, for example, the level of innovation, the market relevance, the growth potential, the expertise of the founding team, their skills, their experience, the business plan, their ability to execute the business plan. Third, the market opportunity, the size of the market, and the potential of the technology and the competitive advantage. And finally, the overall business model, including revenue generation, profitability, or any other intellectual property or unique know-how. For nature-based enterprises, attracting investment often requires demonstrating not only environmental potential, but also a clear and sustainable business case to attract the funding. So once the investors identify the opportunity, they follow a structure evaluation procedure. Following these 4 steps, they start with the initial assessment of the business idea, the portfolio, the strategy, the evaluation of the business model, and after that, the startup or whatever is called to present their vision and the strategy through a pitch presentation. And after that, the investors come to proceed with their due diligence and then the final investment negotiations. And as a result, the entrepreneurs need to be prepared for this with documents including the business plan, a pitch deck, financial projections, market analysis, and information about the teams, a pitch deck. So to summarize it, the nature-based enterprises may have access to different funding sources. Each one, it has its own advantages and its limitations. Public funding is usually the most attractive one in the early stages, usually, because it does not require any repayment and can support innovation or pilot actions. On the other hand, debt financing can provide additional resources for implementation and growth, but it requires repayment and sufficient financial capacity. Equity financing can support rapid scaling and business expansion, although it involves sharing the ownership with the investors. And actually, if you have such an enterprise, and then you want to be successful, you come to combine the different funding sources depending on the stage of your development and your financing needs. And before concluding, briefly, an example of a nature-based enterprise that have successfully combined the innovation with entrepreneurship and the valorization of different funding sources. The Land Life is a company that is focused on large-scale reforestation and ecosystem restoration, and its growth was supported by both equity financing and public funding. They used venture capital funds and impact some investors. And through this approach, they were able to scale their activities and contribute to ecosystem restoration, to enhancement of the biodiversity and the expansion of their activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zina. So now it's time to proceed to the last presentation of today. Our last, but not the least important, of course, speaker is Julia Demus, project manager at Connectology, and working at the intersection of environmental restoration, entrepreneurship, and finance. Julia supports nature-positive projects across Europe by improving access to finance and delivering capacity-building initiatives that connect science, innovation, and impact. And will talk to us about funding freshwater restoration and the MERLIN project. So, Julia, the floor is yours.
My mic. I forgot to switch on my mic. Hello, everybody. And so my name is Julia Demus, and I'm project manager at Connectology. Thank you for introduction. So over the last years, we've been working within the MERLIN project to explore one important question. how can we finance freshwater restoration and nature-based solution at the larger scale? So let me talk a little bit about connectology and what do we do. So connectology is an early stage investment and capacity building company. We empower and connect startups, investors, and public organizations, helping them navigate the innovation ecosystem, discover great opportunities, and achieve their strategic goal. So we work in different areas, including nature restoration and conservation projects. So, and today I would like to talk about our off-the-shelf financial instruments that we developed within the MERLIN project. So this is our portfolio of 12 off-the-shelf instruments is a collection of practical financing pathways that restoration practitioners can explore and adapt to their own context. So I'll just quickly name all of them, and then they fall out to 3 groups. So we'll talk about those 3 groups. So these 12 financial instruments include donation-based crowdfunding, corporate donations, tourism and agriculture activities, debt instruments, credit guarantees, public-private partnerships, grants, sponsorship for natural areas, green bonds, carbon sequestration credits, reward-based crowdfunding, biodiversity offsetting. So we, when creating the instruments, we were using expertise that we have in-house, also external experts, and our colleagues from our work package, and generally our partners from Merlin. So interesting that each of these 12 instruments, so all of them have similar structure, and it contains, so it's usually contains explanation of the instrument itself, implementation steps, benefits and risks, real-life case studies, expert recommendations. It also contains prerequisite to implement, players in the market, and when relevant, consulting companies. So now let me talk about those 3 groups that the off-the-shelf instrument fall down. So first one is community-based instruments. So basically community engagement as a funding strategy. So when you start small and build momentum. So what are these instruments? They are donation-based and reward-based crowdfunding. They are corporate donations, a sponsorship for natural areas, and tourism and agriculture activities. Basically, these are often the easiest entry point for restoration projects. What makes instrument attractive is they are relatively accessible and can be launched quickly. They are also excellent tools for engaging local communities and building public support. However, they rarely generate enough capital to finance large-scale restoration on their own. So again, the benefits is accessible, it's fast to start, it's community engagement limitations is insufficient for large restoration projects. Many successful projects begin here before moving towards the more complex financing mechanism. For example, I just want to give an example of the structure of this instrument. For example, in tourism and agriculture activities, we found that that we needed to add additional how to say, a chapter that talks about opportunity. So it's like 70, we created 75, a list of 75 activities that can be implemented in the nature restoration and conservation zones, nature parks, etc. So which we find very useful for the teams to do the brainstorming, or what are the activities that can be done within the natural areas. So moving next to the market-based instruments, so turning ecosystem benefits into revenue. Here, the OTCs that are in the portfolio are carbon sequestration credits and biodiversity offsettings. So these instruments, it's obvious, the appeal is obvious, they could potentially provide long-term income linked directly to environmental outcomes. However, these instruments are not simple, as we all know. The limitation are that it's very important to have monitoring and verification in place, and also the regulatory requirements that can be very dependent on the country, region, etc. Moving on to the next group of our OTCs, it was institutional finance. So here we're talking about unlocking large-scale capital for restoration. In this group, we're talking about debt instruments, credit guarantees, public-private partnerships, grants, and green bonds. These are different instruments. So these instruments can support landscape scale restoration rather than individual sites. But however, they also come with higher expectations. So the project needs a governance structure, they need risk management, they need monitoring and reporting system, and they need a clear logic showing how financial and environmental outcomes will be achieved. So in our discussions with investors and financial experts, one message comes up repeatedly. Investors really rarely start with impact, they start with risk. So understanding and managing risk is essential. So going beyond OTC, beyond the financial instrument, is the important part is investment readiness. So finance alone is not enough. Projects also need governance and management capacity, risk management and mitigation, clear environmental and financial outcomes, revenue logic. Sorry? Oh, okay. Revenue logic and long-term sustainability, and stakeholder support and partnerships. Aggregation of projects to achieve sufficient scale when relevant. So what we want to say, what we learned, that private finance is neither a silver bullet, so it may not solve all the problem of the project, but also not a myth, because the private finance of freshwater restoration is possible, but only for well-prepared projects. And also private finance requires new skills from the team, and restoration teams need entrepreneurial thinking. So from what we learn is that from restoration project to restoration enterprises, to scale restoration, we need 3 elements. It's practical instrument, it's investment readiness, and entrepreneurial thinking of the team. And then that possibly can lead us to the greater restoration impact at scale. So we did not develop 12 reports to simply sit on a shelf. Our goal is to help restoration teams to discover realistic pathway to finance, straighten their project, and ultimately bring more restoration initiatives to life. Because restoration should not be ecologically viable, it also needs to be financially resilient. So thank you very much. And yes, thank you.
Thank you, Yulia. So I think we are at the perfect timing to launch the Q&A session. I saw very interesting conversations already in the chat. So thanks to our speakers for taking the time to answer those questions. I don't know if you have any last questions, maybe for the last two presenters or any of the speakers?
Or if our speakers want to talk about the responses they provided in the chat, please feel free to have some last words.
Well, I do have a question. I took the liberty to ask it. It's for Yaro about the Anacleto. I will leave you the floor later on. Yeah, so Yaro, you showed some evidence-based regarding the innovative insurance schemes that could be helping into mainstreaming nature-based solutions. Did you have the chance to expose these results to any of the insurance companies? And what do you think? Are they willing to adopt one of these schemes, or there is some kind of reluctance that is persisting till today? I don't know if Yaro's still here.
Yeah, I'm checking also the
Maybe in the
list.
meanwhile, we can move to Anacleto.
Yes, thank you, Nashla. The question is in general for the auditor, because there is in financing MBS, we should be clear on the steps, now what we are financing for. It could be financing of an entrepreneur, so private companies that want to develop specific product for MBS, and it's okay, but MBS usually they are designed and realized not as a conventional product because they are often designed for the landscape. Okay, so there is funding for realizing, someone that is designing, and then the realization. In funding for realizing instead is who pay for the implementation of MBS. There is an aspect of the private that could be interesting for our project in general, that is the green bond or something similar. So the fact that big company access to capital by sustainability report and proof that they are realizing intervention for mitigation in sustainability or biodiversity for obtaining good ESG screening. No, there is all this aspect of sustainable finance that I've not seen touched in the presentation. And so in general, for expert in finance here, if you see this is an option. So, and I'm talking with very basic knowledge on financing, no, but we have seen, for example, there was a news yesterday of SpaceX that received very bad ESG rate and is decreasing the financial value because they don't care about sustainability and proving that they are investing in sustainability. So there is also this aspect of access to private funding for realization of MBS that is very promising, very linked to greenwashing. So, I mean, I don't know if anyone wants to comment on this. It's a general comment because I'm just discovering this word recently and it's quite interesting.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this is the whole dilemma of public goods. NBS are technically delivering mostly public goods. And in some cases, it's a bit hard to distinguish between beneficiaries and providers. So I can only imagine how difficult for the lens implemented in the LACLIV and how to launch this kind of schemes, blended schemes. I think it's very complicated, but I'm also pleased to know that this has taken a further step, moving to a bigger scale, and a couple of other watersheds are also replicating this model. So if we don't have any further questions, maybe some wrap-up comments from my side. So yeah, the webinar has been recorded, so stay tuned. We will share the news so you can find them on our YouTube channels. In FutureLakes, we also have recently launched a Delphi survey to investigate innovative financing solutions for lake protection and restoration. So if you work on similar topics, please feel free to connect or simply scan the QR code to access to the questionnaire. I would like also to thank our speakers for accepting the invitation or for the presentations, the good quality, and also for David Salaberi from BioAzur for doing an amazing work into organizing the event. So big up to everyone.
So thank you everyone on behalf of CARDIMED, NURISH and FutureLakes. Thank you also to projects NATURANCE and MERLIN for the great presentations, and see you next time. Have a good afternoon.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.